All right, sweet. So I gave this presentation before. I never done it like in front of people live. If you watch the previous version of it, you'll notice that halfway through my shirt changes. So yeah, that was recorded over a multitude of sessions. This is gonna be me doing it live. So if you ever deployed an application before, you know that there's always the potential for this to go sideways. But we're gonna be building and deploying a MERN application. So get started with the presentation. My name is Dylan. I'm the treasurer of NightHacks, and I'll be the person walking you through this. So why does this matter? I added this slide because I thought it was kind of cool. I just started at a company, and the company's called HubSpot, and basically they showed this, and I thought it was really kind of relevant and like interesting to why does it matter that you can deploy a MERN application, right? Like why is this something that we should get excited about? So if you look at this in 2006, this is what it cost for the CEO Brian Halligan to initially create HubSpot, like $200,000, along with his co-founder Dharmesh. Now, if you look in 2017, that same thing would cost $1,210, which is really crazy, and it kind of points to why it's so cool that we can like just do a workshop like this and everyone can deploy their own application for free. It's that like within this field of software, we are really we have like the privilege of the tools that we're using are the same tools that people are using in industry. Like there's no like genuinely it's the same thing. They take the same pieces of code, the same tools and everything, and they open source them, which basically just means release it to the public, let people see how it works. And it's really empowering because it really lets us get to go through and be able to just spin up an application that can really be powerful depending on what you're doing with it, which is very interesting. Yeah, that is true. The highest cost for ramen and coffee, and if you'll notice, I thought that was kind of funny, the coffee cost goes up. So it's like the only thing. So what is a MERN application? I'm not really going to read all of this, but basically when you think about MERN, think about it as three different applications, right? You have MongoDB, which is essentially a database. So that's where we store all of the data. You have Express.js, which is a JavaScript library that is essentially lets you create a backend of the application. We'll kind of go into what that is specifically. And React.js, which is what helps us create the front end of the application. So that's the part like the user actually sees and is actually interacting with. And then you have Node.js. So in this scheme of things, Node.js doesn't really serve as an application itself, but it's kind of like the programming language that we're going to use to make all this stuff work together nicely and basically build everything using it. So that's what Node.js is in the grand scheme of this. And when we think about the MERN application, we think about it like a stack. So if you ever hear the term stack, like, this is the MERN stack, this is, the LAMP stack, the Maven stack, like you'll hear a million different names for it. All it means is this is the suite of technologies that we're going to use to build our application. Plain and simple as that. Like a stack is the stack of technologies that my app is built on, So in our situation, these are going to be the technologies that we're using to build our application. So let's get some key terminology out of the way, right? So front end, that's the part of the app that people can actually see. That's, if you go to Rob's Hello World workshops that are really awesome, it's the HTML, CSS, JavaScript, that's really going to make up the front end of our application. It's the part that the user is actually going to be interacting with. Then if you look at the back end, that's basically things you don't see happening on the page, right? So the kind of like the business logic of the application, like when you go to Google and you type something in and you click enter, that's not happening, in the HTML and the CSS. Like there's a very complex algorithm somewhere that exists out there in the cloud, right? And the back end of the application is what's powering that. That's what you're accessing. That's going to handle all the business logic of our application. And then you go into the database, plain and simple, where we're storing the data, how we're going to access this information, how we're going to persist it so that we can access it again when we need it. So those are the three pieces there. Stuff you need to download for this workshop. Node.js and NPM, which if you download Node.js, it should download NPM for you automatically. It kind of manages the packages for it. And Git and GitHub. So if you have a GitHub, we're going to be deploying our app directly from GitHub. So if you don't have an account, you should make one on there and download the Git tools. I think that there was a workshop previously. I think Rob did it. That was all those kind of, yeah. So Rob's nodding. Okay, cool. So if you want to revisit that workshop, if you're watching this at some point to download all those things, you can go ahead and do that. So step one, we're going to set up our database. So obviously, where am I? I swear. Oh, I'm presenting. So we're going to set up our database. So if you come in here, if you want to go to this page here, what you're going to do is go to Google, type in MongoDB Atlas. Go here. If you don't already have an account, you're going to want to sign up for one. I don't know if it asks for, card information or anything like that, but this is one of the cloud service providers where if we set it to using the things that we're going to set it to, it won't charge you money. So, I'm not a financial advisor, but I'm going to tell you right now, you should not be charged any money for doing any of the things that we're doing here. If we were doing this same workshop on other cloud service providers, it would be the potential that you could be charged if you went over a certain usage limit or things like that. But like specifically, I wanted to use MongoDB Atlas, which is a version of like a MongoDB database. As the treasurer said, he's not. Yeah, I mean, I'm not everyone's financial advisor, outside of the club. But yeah, so I mean, basically MongoDB Atlas it's gonna take our database and store it in the cloud. And the cloud could be thought of as someone else's computer somewhere else, not our computer, right? So basically it's gonna spin up this database for us and it's gonna store it out there in the cloud somewhere. And if we come in here, after you go through the process of setting up your account and everything, you're gonna be able to come in here and you're gonna see basically that like this is me after already setting up my little database and everything, that this is how information is stored in MongoDB. These are referred to as documents. So this is kind of like the way that they structure the information and how we're going to be accessing it in this workshop. And specifically, this is our books collection. So it's a collection of documents and each book has a title, a description, and an author. So I'm actually going to delete this cluster and we're just going to go through the process of creating a cluster so that that's like clear to everybody how we got to this point. Before I do that, let me just show you what the live app that we're going to be building even looks like, because once I destroy this cluster, it's not going to work anymore. But essentially, we're going to make a little book manager. It's going to manage our books. Yeah, totally. So is that a good like zoom level for everybody? Two more steps. I'll do one. Okay. Is that good for everybody? Sweet. Okay. So as you can see here, this is basically the application we're going to be making. We're just gonna, you can basically type in a book, right? So I don't know, let's say, what's a good book? Becoming a really good book, Michelle Obama. You can submit that. We refresh the page. And as you'll notice, like Heroku apps load really, really quickly. So that's going to be something that we're going to be working through for this workshop. Then if I go to the bottom of my list, it did not seem to like that. Yeah, so now you see it does work. But yeah, basically this is what we're going to be building here, just a really kind of simple app, but really powerful when you start to kind of build more on top of it. So if we come back into MongoDB Atlas here, we'll notice that after we did that, it actually updated books here with the information on that book, Becoming by Michelle Obama. So just to get started here, let's go back in and see if I can figure out how to delete a cluster. We go to my clusters, and then we go here, and I'm going to terminate this cluster. And just to walk you through the process of how you create this yourself, I'm going to wait for that to shut down. Well, that may take a second. So while we're waiting for that MongoDB cluster to get shut down, we're also going to come over here. This, I have a repository for the workshop, so let me hop over and I'll send that in the chat. This is the complete code. So, you know, if everything goes haywire and I don't finish it within this workshop, feel free to hop over here and check it out. I don't know if Atlas has dark mode. I tried to figure that out the other day, but I honestly, I mean, if you find it, let me know, because that would be pretty cool. But yeah, so coming in here, so this is our workshop here. What we're actually going to do is come into GitHub, and we are going to go to repositories, and we're going to make a new repository. Call it whatever you want. I'm going to call mine MERN app, and we'll give it a description. We'll throw a README in there. And yeah, we're going to create that repository. And as you can see, the README is very, very descriptive. We're going to hop over here. We're going to clone our repository, and you can do that once you create it by clicking on code and then copying this. And then we're going to hop over to our command line. If anyone has never opened up like the command line on their computer, if you go down here, I'm using something called iTerm, but even if you like just specifically on Mac, if you go here and you type in terminal, this will open up a command line for you. And then to decide where you're going to copy this folder, you can use the CD commands. So if CD is basically going through your computer and the directories and everything the same way you would like if you had Finder, File Explorer, or something open, right? So it's going to open to whatever directory, and you can figure out where you are by typing ls, and it's going to give you all the things that are in that directory. And then once you do that, when you click CD, you just have to put the name of any of the things that you just saw there, and it'll bring you into that directory. So we are going to first, because I'm already in the directory that I want to be in here, we're going to go git clone, and we're going to recopy that. And we're going to clone that into this directory. So now we have a directory that we can work out of. And then you just have to, whatever you named it, you have to be able to CD into that. And here we are. And you can see our GitHub repository is all good. We have our branch origin main. And yeah, we're all good here. So we have our place set up to start with our app. Let's see how our cluster is doing. And our cluster is gone. So now I can show you how building a cluster would go. You just click build cluster. We're not paying for this cluster, so we're going to click build a free cluster. I think you can pick any of these. I really don't think it'll give you too much of an issue, but I'm just going to stick with AWS here. Cluster tier, this should automatically be M0 sandbox and no backup because we don't really care about this data too much. And the cluster name, we can just leave that as the default. And then we can create our cluster. And that's going to take 1 to 3 minutes to start. So while that's working, we can go ahead and get started on the actual meat and potatoes of this application. So hopping back in here, if you already have npm installed, I think you can check if it's installed just by doing like that or something. Yeah, so npm --v if you want to see if you already have npm installed. I actually am really dumb and I downloaded this stupid thing, nvm, and it basically has only caused me issues. It just changes the version just arbitrarily, it seems sometimes. So that command doesn't mean anything for probably a lot of people unless you're in the same boat as me. But yeah, so now what we're going to do is we're going to use the command to create a React app. And what's really cool about this workshop and what I'm really going to try to like make happen here is we're not going to touch many files. A lot of the files that we're going to have to work with are going to be auto-generated, and then we're just going to be able to go from there. So in the example of the React app, I think we're going to have to touch like one file that's actually within the React app, and the rest is just going to be auto-generated stuff for us. And it's also good because this isn't a React workshop. And if you went to, Rob's, I think it was Tuesday, like you'll understand that like it can be a learning curve for all of these technologies by themselves. So kind of combining all of them into one, it's good that we're able to kind of compartmentalize that. But the command to do that is going to be npx create-react -app, and we're going to call this front end because it's the front end of our application. So we'll run that. Yep, you should be running npx create-react-app front end within your directory, like within the, after you've cloned that repository that you created and you cd'd into it, then you should run that. And this is also going to take a long time because, I mean, what you'll find is if you're on a Zoom call and you're trying to do anything that, takes a lot of your computer's power, it's going to take a little while. So we're going to let that run for a second. I'm going to hop back over to the slides. As you can see, this has finished getting set up. And if I hop back over the slides, let me see how far out of order I've gone. So for the database setup, this was a little bit of information, and it's also mentioned that it's a NoSQL database, but that doesn't matter too much for our purposes. This isn't really like a workshop about databases. If you wanted to learn more about NoSQL specifically and the differences between relational and non-relational databases, we're really trying to be beginner friendly with this, and that was a big purpose of like what I was trying to accomplish with this workshop, is just not going too deep into the weeds because you can really get lost. But yeah, there's definitely great resources online for that. So set up Heroku. Now what we're going to do is hop over to Heroku. So this is just, I think you can just go to heroku.com. I'm already logged into my account, but if you aren't, you can just, create an account, log into it. This is also not going to charge you any money. And, if you like, I don't even think this will require a credit card or any kind of information for you to enter to even get started. So we're just going to create a new app. Should we name it? MERN Workshop App. The name must start with a lowercase letter. MERN Workshop. And then we're going to create that app. And boom, now we have a place to deploy our application. It was that easy. If you're working on a hackathon, I would really, really recommend, like, Heroku is really good with this kind of stuff. As you start to kind of like build a project and grow it, it can get really hard to stay within like Heroku because it's really cheap at the beginning, but it can get more expensive as you continue to go. And then what we're actually going to end up doing is connecting to GitHub. I think if you haven't already connected your account, it's going to ask for some information here, and you're going to have to enter that. But for the moment being, we don't have to worry about that too much. But basically what this is going to accomplish for us is when we put code into our GitHub repository, it's going to automatically deploy that for us, which is going to be very, very valuable as we go forward. So let's see how we're doing on that create React app. So great. So as you can see, it created the front end and it was a success. And it even gives us nice commands on what to do now. So it's a cd in the front end and npm start. So, let's just listen to it. Cd in the front end, npm start. And what this is basically doing is it created the app in its own folder, and the npm start command is the command to start running the app. So it's like, okay, like run this locally for me, like just whatever instance of this app that you just created. And as you can see, if you did it successfully and npm start ran with no problem, you should be able to open up the browser and you'll see this. It will say edit source/app.js and save to reload the page. I think I'm going way out of the order of my slides, but I think that's totally fine. Let me see. Oh, actually, I'm right on pace with it. So yeah, we just created our React application. Great. And yeah, this is kind of a nice point to make here. And I think I'd actually heard Chris make this point before, but like the really cool thing about a MERN Stack application, and the reason why like I would recommend that being something that you learn, besides it being like a really employable skill and being some really nice stuff to know, is that it's really interchangeable. Like if you know what React Native is, basically the same thing as React for the web, but for a mobile device. So if you're good with a MERN Stack, you could very quickly build mobile applications. You could build, web applications. And even if you have no interest in web development, this isn't something that's really like totally, gauging your interest. If you look at machine learning and other areas of computer science, basically everything has a web interface, and it's the easiest way to let people interact with your thing. Like what's the primary way you probably are interacting with machine learning in like your everyday life is probably on a website somewhere that, is using that. So just understanding how to throw this up, even in like the context of a hackathon or something like that, can be really, really good, just so that you have a way for people to interact with their thing, whatever it is and wherever your interests are. But yeah, that was just a quick little discourse there. And And yeah, we've got our React app running, and we have our cluster created in MongoDB. So let's start with just how are we going to make this not look bad? Because right now this doesn't look anything like this, which is what we're trying to create, right? So we hop back over to our React app and it says edit source/app.js and save to reload. So source./app.js, that's going to be the first file that we're going to change. So if I open up a new tab here in the same directory and I zoom in a bunch because that's really hard to read. Is everyone good? Okay, sweet, sweet. So no one is hopelessly lost yet. I am more than happy to, go back to any point if anyone was like, what the hell is going on? I talk really fast. I drank a lot of coffee before I started this because, it's 7:30 at night, trying to keep that high energy. But I mean, honestly, even if you guys want to just come off mute and be like, I have no idea what's going on, there's going to be a recording of this workshop and I'm going to finish the deployment and everything. So that information will get out there, but definitely like stop me at any point and be like, whoa, 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 like, I don't know what's happening. If, anything is just totally confusing you. Sweet, we have Rob caught up. The initial steps for the cluster, I don't know if I can go through them again, but basically don't change any of the default configuration, right? If you're at this screen here and you're already logged into like an account you created and everything, there should just be a button here that says create cluster and you should be able to click it and then just go through the steps that it gives you. And you want to click the shared cluster that's free. It should be the one all the way to the right. And after you do that, it should set everything up for you. When we make this front end app, where does it run exactly? Is it in the client's browser? So like, I don't want to confuse anyone with that kind of stuff, but basically when you run npm start, it's starting a server locally on your computer. And the way that you'll access that kind of stuff is via ports on your computer. So you're accessing it on the 3000 port on your local host, right? So like localhost 3000 is kind of how that's working. So yeah, it's spinning up a development server here. And yeah, we can just access it directly from the browser because it's running locally on our machine. The same way it would run on some machine out there in the cloud, and then you'd access it that way. That's kind of how this this magic here is happening. If everyone's good with that and there's no other questions or anything, when it gets deployed in Heroku, it will run on the front. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it'll basically be doing the same thing, but just accessing someone else's computer somewhere else. So moving forward, I do want to recommend this. I know a lot of people use something called Material UI. If you don't know what that is, that's totally fine. But essentially what this is it's a component library. Because when you work with HTML and CSS and you have to make larger websites and stuff, it can be a real hassle to build everything yourself. And component libraries are really awesome because if you look here, these are, yeah, Rob used Material UI on Tuesday. But I like Ant Design a little bit more. Personally, I don't know, I've used Material UI before and I started using this and I just liked it a little bit more. But basically it gives you all of these different things that you can just plug and plop into your website, and in the perfect world, they just work. So what we're going to do actually is we're going to install this package into our React app, and then we're going to use it to build a nice little front end that's going to make our app look better. Hopping back into here, we're going to copy this command. And if you want to go here, it's ant.design/docs/react/introduce. I think if you just go to ant.design, you'll be able to find this page pretty quickly. So you're going to want to take this command here. You want to come back to your app and make sure that you're in the front end folder, because this is where we're installing these files and everything. And we're going to say npm, or just copy the command, npm install antd, which stands for ant design. So run that. Hopefully this will run a little bit faster than our previous command did. I mean, it seems a little faster. Seems close. Sweet, sweet. Okay, cool. So now we have that package installed. Yeah, no, it's really weird. Node is just really just kind of a thing of its own sometimes. So what we're gonna do here, right, is now we want to actually view what this code is looking like and how we have everything. How do we get the app that's running on localhost to shut down so I can use the terminal again? So what you can leave it open and open another tab in your terminal. I think it'll probably work for you to just click, if you're on Windows, I think you can just click Control T, or if you're on Mac, you can probably just click Command T in your terminal, and that'll open a new tab in your terminal, and then you'll just have to go back to the same directory to access it. Or if you want to kill this and you don't want it to run anymore, you could push Control C, and that will just kill whatever the process running is. But I'm going to be honest, this might take a little while for it to start up again with this Zoom, so I'm going to leave it running. Okay, awesome. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go out one. I have this installed as like a thing where I can just type in like code dot and it'll open up an editor in like the right or whatever folder I was in. If you don't have that, you can just open up VS Code and open up the file, the folder that you created on your machine. And as you'll see, the only thing that we have in this right now is a front end folder with all of this nice information. And when we come back to MERN, this one, it told us to edit source/app.js. So we're going to listen to what it told us to do, and we're going to go into source app.js. And as you'll see here, this is exactly the content that's being rendered out here. So you even see like the text is the same, edit source/app.js and save to reload. So we don't want any of this. This probably isn't really what we want our app to look like. So we're going to delete that. And then come back here and you'll see it automatically refreshed our page. And now this is just an empty white page, right? So we're going to go ahead and do that. And then we're going to go into Ant Design, and we're going to see, is there anything else we have to do to make sure that this is set up correctly? And there is. We have to add this, which is basically a style sheet using CSS. If you're unfamiliar with CSS, I think there's either a workshop coming up or there's already been one on CSS for the Hello World workshop series. I'm not sure if that already happened or not. I don't think it did, but it's coming up soon. CSS is next week. So if you want to learn more about CSS, that is a really good workshop to go to. But for now, just understand that CSS is going to make the page look better. It's going to control all the styling on the page and how the things are going to render and look. So we're just going to add the Ant Design CSS here and come back here and make sure that that loaded correctly. We don't have any errors. Okay, cool. So now let's start grabbing the components that we want. So if you go to the components tab on Ant Design, you can just look through here and find components you like. So it seems like layout would probably be pretty helpful. And this is a really great thing about Ant Design, is that you can literally just click the code tab and you'll just have the exact imports that you'll need to do, exactly how you need to set up the JSX. And again, like this is going to be really confusing if you've never done React before. I really recommend, like, you know, if you're watching this later, if you know you're a little bit confused, take some time and watch like Rob's workshop. I thought that was great, and like that'll be a great like introductory to what the hell is going on right now. But we're just going to copy this, which is going to basically render this layout on our app. And we don't even need that anymore. And then we're going to come back here because it's not going to have any idea what any of this stuff is. And we're going to import all of these components. And then we're going to come back to our app. We're going to reload it. Yeah, it's specifically like they take shots at they don't take shots at Material UI, but like Material UI is the most popular one. Ant Design is kind of the second one. I think it's specifically used in, like, if you know what Ant is like, I think it's a group of companies like that are like, one of theirs is like Alibaba, like the Ant group. So like that's their design system that they've kind of open sourced, which is really cool. And it's mad about something, but I don't know what it is. Import embody of module, reorder to top. Oh, you know what this is? Sorry, I use something called, yeah, I use something called ESLint. What ESLint basically does is it looks at your code and sees if it's following certain style guidelines. Really should have turned that off before this workshop. Would you use Bootstrap instead of that if you wanted Bootstrap? So the cool thing about Bootstrap is that it works well with other libraries. And like if I wanted to add Bootstrap to this project, I would do the same thing I just did for Ant Design, right? I would import the Bootstrap CSS and I would install Bootstrap. But personally, like I really like using Bootstrap because they have a grid system that's really good that kind of helps you organize content on your page. And you can also obviously like you could be using Bootstrap and Ant Design if you wanted to. It's totally up to you. Ant Design just seems to like provide me more of like what I'm trying to use a lot of the time. Where did you grab the JSX for the layout? So if you go to any of the components and you click, no problem. If you click these little things down here underneath it that says show and hide code, that's where you can grab all the code for your layout. So coming back here. So to make this look the way that we want it to look, I'm actually going to throw some CSS styles on here. You know, once again, I'm probably gonna say this like a million times, but you know, this could be really confusing. We have one. So are we going to go over how React components work in this workshop, or are we going to use this component library? So we're going to use this component library. If you want a better idea of like React and a deeper dive into React, I would say watching Rob's workshop is going to be the best, just because there's different things that we're trying to like accomplish here, and it's going to be kind of hard to, you know, go deep into React and how different things are working, specifically like with React in mind. You know, so like from just the perspective of right now, all we need to understand is that in this file, anything we put in here is going to get rendered out to this page. So but Rob does a great job in his workshop of like kind of going more deep into React, and like if you want to separate things out into components, if you want to change, you know, the way that this is laid out and stuff, definitely would recommend watching that. But we're not going to go too super deep into it. Yeah, just like Rob said, they're basically just some nice styled components that are going to help us not have to write all of this stuff ourselves. So I'm going to throw some CSS styles on here just to make this look the way that we want it to. Basically, I'm going to make the background white here, and that's going to make this white. I'm going to make a margin of 20 pixels. And then we're going to make this have a min height of 100 VH. All right, so those are just some like really quick styles that I added here. I'll kind of go through each one. Basically, when you want to add inline styles in React, you just, this is the syntax to do it. And I made the minimum height be 100% of the viewport height. So that's why this got much bigger. And then I made the background white and I added a 20 pixel margin here, which basically said, make this thing here white. And the margin obviously didn't do anything. So we can check why that didn't work. Let's try padding. Well, if I spelled it right, it probably would have worked. Yep. Yeah, I've never heard of this library before. Definitely going to use it. Absolutely. Yeah, no, definitely. Like when I was using Material, I definitely liked just the look and feel of the Ant Design components more, which is kind of why I shifted more towards using it. All right, so now we have a front end. It's kind of doing what we want, but we also want to throw a form in there. So if we go to Ant Design Components, we find the form component. We're probably just going to want to grab like one of the first ones here. This one, no. Trying to find a really simple one that'll probably be the easiest for us to just change around. Yeah, so let's just keep it with this one. So we'll come in here and we'll do the same thing we did before, where we just grab all of this, copy it, come back over here. And what we're going to want to do is we can just delete this, and we're just going to want to copy it inside of content here. And then you can fix the formatting so that everything is lined up properly. And a lot of this we aren't going to need, so we don't have a lot of the things that they were using, so we can get rid of that. we can get rid of that. We can get rid of rules because we don't like these rules specifically within ant design are just giving rules to what can be put into like certain fields and everything, but we don't really care about those. They can put anything they want in here. We don't need a checkbox. And we'll keep our button type of submit and just delete the rest of the things that we probably don't need. So we have our form in here now, and then we're going to want to come back over and just grab the different things that they're importing. And I'm already importing this. So I'll just come in here and do that. And finally, you'll see like this on finish function. Basically, when we click the submit button, this function is going to get called. It's going to do whatever the on finish function is telling it to. So if we come back over here, we can just grab theirs. And that should be everything. So now if we come back to our app and we reload it. Yeah, so now we have a nice little form, nice little setup for the application. But we aren't actually taking a username and password, so that needs to change. Are the TypeScript versions of these components any different from the normal JavaScript versions? That is a great question, Mike. So basically what Mike is asking is, there's a version of JavaScript called TypeScript, which is, if you've ever done C or Java or any of those kind of languages, those languages have types, right? Like there's an integer and there's a Boolean. JavaScript doesn't have types. So TypeScript basically just adds types to JavaScript. I've actually never used the TypeScript version of it, but I would assume they would probably work the same because a lot of the components that I've seen have already written in TypeScript. But I definitely recommend double checking that because I've never done that before. I copied the TypeScript version, but I just removed the types. So it kind of, yeah. So I mean, considering that I just did that and it is going to work, I would assume that you shouldn't have any problem just using those interchangeably as long as you add and remove those types. So just to make sure, first we're going to come back in here. We're going to add one more form field here. And we're going to name these the fields that we want our book to have. So we're going to call it title, description, and author. And neither of these are passwords, so we can just delete that. And then we'll come back in here and we'll see our 3 fields here, the same as we had on this app. Obviously, this is much smaller, so I can zoom in on this. And for now, we'll just leave it at this with the submit button. And a way that we can check if this is working is here, it's doing something called console.log. So console.log, if you've ever done like C, you could think of that as like print. It's basically printing to the console. And in the web browser, our console is actually located, if you go to inspect element and you click console, this is where our console output's going to go. So if we just type something in here, we would expect it to show up something like this with an author, a description, and a title, just so that we make sure that that's working correctly. And yeah, so now we've got basically the front end set up and ready to go when we have something for it to actually store stuff in. So now it's time to come back to the slideshow. And we're going to create the Express application. So Express, like we talked about, is going to handle the business logic, the back end of the application. So in order to do this, building it's pretty straightforward, and it's going to host the front end. So in order to create an Express app, what you're going to do is make sure that you're in this directory, the MERN-app one, and in your terminal, and I think I made a note of these commands. Yep. This probably would have been a little bit helpful earlier on, but I'll copy this. These are some of the commands that we used, and 2 of them are ones that we're about to use. So what you're going to do is go to your console and you're going to type in npm init-y. So what that's basically doing is it's initializing the place for us to start building our app. If you look in like here we have a package JSON, which is basically handling all the other things that our app is going to be using. You know, like it's, if you look in here, there's like we have React, and a lot of, you know, other things, but like AntD, when we added that to our project, that's where it got stored. So we're going to initialize a package JSON in this outermost MERN app folder. And the -y is basically like, if I hadn't used -y, it would have brought me through like a little, like an interactive thing where you could just go through and click yes, 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 but that'll just say yes to everything automatically. And then these are all of the, and I just realized there was an error in what I sent. So instead of dotting, it's going to be .env here. And I'll just recopy that and send it again so no one types in the wrong thing. But yeah, so this is what you're going to want to type in. And then you can just copy this and hop over. And this is going to add all the packages that we need, like all at once. So just copy that. And that'll go through and install everything that we're going to need. Okay, awesome. So then we come back here. I know we said, how many files are we at? That was 1, 2. Okay, so we touched 2 files. That means that we don't have that many more. All right, I'm going to touch this one. I'm going to see just to make sure. Okay, so everything's looking good in here. And as you can see, it just stored all of our dependencies in this file right here. So we have body parser, .env, express, mongoose, and path. Those are all the ones that we're going to use. So now what you're going to want to do is go here and create a new file. And our entire Express app is going to be in one file. We're going to call that file server.js. So you should have this empty file here. And then if you want documentation on like how to create an Express app, where are the docs? So there's the Express website that has really good documentation. And then there's also the Mongoose website. Mongoose is basically how we're going to interact with MongoDB from within Express. And they have really good documentation as well. But I'm just going to kind of go through and go line by line here. Could you go back to the onFinish briefly? I missed that totally. So in onFinish, currently all we're doing is we're taking in values, and Ant Design is already getting the values from this form for us when we click this button, and we're just taking them and we're console logging them here. Are you all good with that, Rob? Cool. Okay. Sweet. So then going into the server, we are going. So I'll just go line by line and kind of explain how we're doing this. And to be totally honest with you, like you're going to have to set up the Express app itself once, and each subsequent thing that you're going to be doing is building on top of that with like additional routes people are going to access information from on your app. So I'm just going to be going line by line here, and I'll kind of explain what each line is doing. So const express equals require express, and then const app equals express. So this is boilerplate, and boilerplate just means like code that you're gonna have to write over and over again, but this is basically gonna initialize our Express application here. And then we're gonna go to the next line, and we're gonna import the other things that we're gonna end up needing. So require path, const mongoose equals require mongoose, and const body parser equals require body parser. And okay, so then we're going to go to the next line. And when you're using anything that's related to the app, Express has really good docs on like all the different things that you can do with it. It's super, super extensible, but basically we're going to want to add middleware, and middleware, you can kind of think of it as like a layer between the front end and the back end. It's going to do stuff to our data before we receive it on the back end and after it gets sent out of the front end. So for here, what we actually want to do is use something on this body parser, which is why we're including it. And we're going to want to say body parser dot JSON. And then we're going to want to say app.use body parser dot URL encoded. So both of these lines are basically just going to make sure that by the time that we receive the information in our backend, it's going to be formatted correctly. And you could definitely look up the documentation on body parser and kind of go through a bit deeper on how exactly it's doing that. But for now, I think that, yep, body parser is considered, I believe it's considered middleware. I could be wrong, Lewis. If you know more than me, I would be more than happy to give you the stage to explain that. Okay, cool. I thought you like knew something that I didn't. Okay, I think it's considered middleware because it's essentially transforming our data before we receive it on the back end. So I'm pretty sure that it's middleware, but I could totally be wrong about that. So coming back here, now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to basically just start our application. So how that works is essentially this app has a .listen method. And all that we're going to want to do here is give it a port to listen on. So the same way that if you go here, this is running on 3000. We're going to want to do that same thing for our Express app because it's two separate applications that are running. And we're going to declare what our port is going to be called. And then this is a callback function. If you're unfamiliar with this kind of notation, this is the same thing as like in C. If you just put like any kind of function in C, but this just JavaScript has a really weird notation that's pretty cool, I guess, where you can put an arrow and it'll give you a function. It's really less verbose, so it's kind of cool. And then we're going to console.log. Since if we reach this case, our app is running. Our app is and then we need to add one more thing in this file that we had open earlier, and that's in the script section. We need some kind of script, right? Like npm start that we ran in the front end that's going to start this application for us. So we're going to come in here. We're going to add a start script, which is basically, it just means that we can run this script and it's going to do whatever we tell it to do here. And the script is going to be node server.js. And if you've ever used C and you've done like you run it from the command line and you did like, GCC whatever /a.out, this is basically in Node, this is how you run a program. In Python, this would be the equivalent of like Python server.py, but this is just node server.js. So it's just going to run the server.js file and the rest should be handled for us. So if we come back here and we do npm start, npm run start, you'll see our app is running on port 3000, which is interesting because I thought this app was running on port 3000. So that's a problem. These should not be running on the same port. So hop back into here, change this to 8080. Okay, so now this should be good. So as you can see on localhost 3000, we still have our front end running. And then if you go to localhost 8080, cannot get. But the fact that it says cannot get instead of just some random page tells us that our Express app is running. So now we're going to come back here and we're going to connect this application to our database. So we're going to go down a couple lines and we're going to do mongoose.connection, mongoose.connect. And we're going to go back into MongoDB Atlas to this cluster, and we're going to click the connect button. And we're going to say connect our application. We're going to copy this. If you haven't set up a user and you haven't set up like a database name or anything like that, basically the way that you can do that is if you go into collections. I don't even think we have a database here. Yeah, so you're going to want to say add my own data. For now, we'll just call the database name books, and we'll give our collection the name books. But you have to just set up one to begin with so you know what to connect to. And then if we go back to clusters and we click connect and connect our application, it should also give you the option to, what's it called? Like if this is your first time running it, it'll give you the option of network connection as well as create a user. I always just create the user admin root. Probably isn't the best because it's really easy to guess what the password is, which would let anyone connect to the cluster, but not a big deal for this purpose. And then also network connection, you can just say connect from anywhere. It doesn't matter if people are accessing this cluster. They can't run up the rates where you'll start paying money on this. So I'm going to copy this. And then I'm going to come back to the mongoose.connect here. And I'm just going to paste that. And then I'm going to go in and type in my password as well as the database name books. And then we're going to give it a callback. Actually, you also need to pass in a couple parameters here. So throw that, use new URL parser. And this is just stuff that you have to set this up once when you first connect to the cluster. And if you go back into the Mongoose documentation, you'll probably see why it's requiring these. I have no idea. I just did it because it was mad at me when I didn't, when I was setting up this workshop. But definitely, if you check out those Mongoose docs, I think I linked them in the README. And you want to know more about this specifically and why it requires a unified topology, feel free to. True. And then this is another callback, but this one specifically, if we get an error, it's gonna console.log the error. So that'll help us with debugging it. And then we're also going to add mongoose.connection.on open. And we're gonna console.log. Yeah, Rob, if you would want to set that to be just the 0.0.0.0 option that just lets you connect from anywhere. Connect to your application. So if you click connect your application, then you should be all good. And then you want to console.log connected to database. Okay, and then if we stop our app by pressing Control-C and then we start it again, it'll say connected to our database, hopefully, if it opened correctly. And our app is running on port 8080. And I think that null is coming from the fact that there wasn't an error. So we should be all good. We should be connected to our database and we should be ready. Any particular reason you're connecting to the DB after setting up middlewares? No, not specifically. Honestly, you could probably put the middlewares any way that you want. I'm certainly, so just to clarify also, I'm a student just like everyone else. This workshop is slightly different than I did it a year ago because of the fact that I probably learned more stuff. So if anyone knows more about specific parts of this than me and wants to, mention hey, Dylan, that makes no sense what you're doing, please do. But for the specifically the case of the middlewares, I don't think that it matters. Well, it works adding them here. You could probably add them in different places if you wanted to. And you could, I think actually Express has a JSON middleware built into it. So I don't even know if you would need to use body parser if you didn't want to, but yeah, there's definitely a lot of different flavors. Can you scroll right, please? So I didn't get all of line 10. Okay, yeah. So on line 10, and I'll just honestly copy and paste this. So basically it's going to be, how do you do that? I don't know how to wrap lines. I would love to do that, but I do not know how to. So I can just, so just clicking enter. Okay, so that's probably what we were trying to accomplish. I think you can just break out a line and a comma. Yeah, because I don't know why, but I was just thinking you wanted me to break in the middle of this string, and I was like, I don't know what's going on, but okay, good. So as long as everybody can see that, I'm going to be coming back to this file, so you'll get a chance to copy the rest if you haven't got it all yet. You can soft wrap somehow. I'm not sure how to do that, Rob. So coming back here, basically, we are connected to our MongoDB Atlas instance, and now what we want to do is we want to create a route that's basically going to let us put things into the database. And we also want to create a schema for what we're putting into the database. So a lot of this is just going to be things that you can find if you go to the Mongoose documentation and you read a little bit closer. But I'm just going to go through and start working through that. Quick little segue. When it comes to two applications interacting with each other, there are these things called requests, and they're pretty like semantically, they're exactly what they are. So there's such thing as like a get request and a post request. Those are gonna be the two that we're interfacing with like today. A post request basically means take this information, right? Take the information sitting on our app here and put it in our database, post it to the database. And obviously a get request would be get me the information out of the database. So hopping back in here, the way that we would first create a schema is in Mongoose. We're going to, and we want a book schema. So we're going to say const book schema equals mongoose.schema. And we're going to have the title be a string, the author be a string, the description be a string. So this is basically going to tell MongoDB what we want these books to look like. And then we're going to use the schema to make a model called book. And that's going to be mongoose.model. And this first argument here, I believe is going to be the collection where you want to store it. So we created a books collection. So we just want to store it in books. And then the second argument is going to be the schema that it's supposed to use. So we're going to use our book schema that we just created. And finally, we're going to make our post route. So the way that you make a route that you can, hit and post information to is we're going to say app.post. We're just going to call this route /API. And API is short for application programming interface. If you ever see that and you're like, what the hell does that mean? Basically, it's a lot of APIs are going to be things that you're going to have to interface with to, get applications working, get information from other sources. But that's what an API is. And then we're going to say async rec res 2. And the reason we're adding this async here is because JavaScript usually just runs all the lines as fast as it can. But for this specific operation, we want to wait for something to happen before we go through and do all that. So we're just going to throw async in there. And what we're going to want to do is basically this request has a body. And that's where our information is going to be that we're going to want to store in our database. So we're going to say const body equals rec.body. And this body should already be in the format that we want because we added this middleware here. It's going to set that up for us. And then we're going to say const book equals new book body. And basically, like if this body comes in the format title string or title author description, Mongoose is going to know when we do this, okay, he wants to create a book. And he wants this to be the title, this to be the author, this to be the description. So that's how we would create a new book, basically. So we're just going to be able to do that. And then Mongoose makes it really easy to save things to the database. The method for saving things is literally just book.save. And then you have a callback, right? And the callback is basically after we save the book, what do you want us to do? So what we want it to do is, and it takes in an error parameter. So what we want is, if there is an error, right, we want to send that back. So the resolution is basically this here, this res is, what are we sending back? Like, how did this resolve? What happened after? So if there's an error, we probably want to tell them that it's an error, right? So somewhere within this, like this idea of, get and post requests, there needs to be some way that we know, well, did the get request work? You know what I mean? Like, did we get the thing successfully? So that's where status codes come in. So the two status codes you're primarily going to see are going to be probably like a 500 and a 200. A 500 means everything broke, we don't know what's wrong. 400, I think, just means unauthorized. You're probably familiar with like 404 when you get a page not found. There's a lot of other ones, but those are probably the primary ones you're going to see. We're just going to say res.status 403 forbidden. Yeah, we're up. That's right. if you're using await, can't you just save the return value from .save instead of using a callback? You could, but you know, it's interchangeable. You could do it however you want. We probably don't even need this await now that I look at it, but it's already here. Should probably just leave it. And we could definitely mess around with it and see if it's even necessary afterwards. But we're gonna say res.send failed to add a book to the database. Because if there's an error, it probably didn't add the book correctly. Else, we're gonna say res.status is 200 because it completed successfully. And we're gonna say res.send successfully added the book to the database. And then that should be everything that we need to do for our post route. Yep, I think that should be it. Okay, awesome. So now we come back to the slides and I realize that we might be running a little late on time. So I mean, if I'm running later, like definitely like I'm gonna stop like as we get closer to the end, but feel free, like if I'm going too late, like you're absolutely, free to, this is gonna be recorded, you'll be able to watch it later, but just so everyone knows, because this is about like, we're connecting the back end of the database, we've gone through that step, and then connecting the front end to the back end is our next step. Because now we basically have a route that we can hit that's gonna let us access the database, but now we need to be able to do something with that from this file, right? And that's where this onFinish function is gonna come into play. So what we're gonna do here is first, I guess I lied, this is another file we're gonna have to open, dang it. Open up the package JSON in the front end, go down and type in proxy and put localhost 8080, I think is the port that we did it on. And basically what this is gonna do is it's gonna send your request that you're making, like the request that we're about to make, it's gonna send that to port 8080 instead of sending that to where the React app is running on port 3000. VS Code is showing a line underneath await, which means it won't make a difference. Sweet, thank you, Mike. As long as I don't break anything. So going into onFinish, we can say, and from within React, we actually have access to something that can make get and post requests within here. So what we're going to do is type in fetch, and fetch is basically built into browsers. It's like window.fetch. It's just going to allow us to fetch information. And what we're going to do is we're going to type in /API, and that's going to send the request to the localhost 8080/API. And then we're going to add this information, which is just additional information about the request. So method, we're going to do a post. It can affect your stack traces if filling through is inside the awaited function. Probably, it probably will. We can try it afterwards and see if it even matters. Body JSON.stringify values. And the reason we're doing that is because I think within this fetch function that we're using here, it doesn't let you have a body that's like formatted, like it has to be formatted as a string, I believe, which will then get handled by our middleware in the backend with the body parser.json and everything. So we'll receive it as JSON here. But just in order to send it initially, we need to turn that JSON into a string. So we're going to fetch that, and then we're going to say .then res to console.log res. So that's probably going to confuse the hell out of some people. But basically, when you use a function like this function isn't going to complete immediately. So if we were to just put console.log like res down here or something, we need to wait for the resolution to be finished. We need to wait for this code to execute and all of this to run and the book to save and everything before we can do anything with it on our front end, which is basically why we do this .then here. This is like a JavaScript promise. If you want to read more about that, that'll make a lot more sense. And you could use async await here as well. I just .then is, definitely interchangeable in this sense. But like right here, we're doing a .then, which means wait for all of this stuff to finish and then do something with the resolution. And for now, we're just going to print it out. So if we come back to our app, that's running on localhost 3000. And we type in becoming Michelle Obama, very good book. And we submit that. we'll get a 404 error not found on /API, which is exactly what we were looking for, right? No, it isn't. So let's go back into the server and make sure that everything's right here. app.post/API with an async rec and res. I'll tell you exactly what the problem was. Basically, when we're using React here, it's automatically refreshing it every time we make changes. But for this Express application, it's not doing that. So I think all we need to do is that and make sure that we saved our file correctly. And then let's try submitting this one more time. And we get another 404 error. Perfect. I guess it's just not proxying the request correctly, but not a problem. Proxy is kind of like a secondary thing. It makes it easier in development, but we don't actually need it in practice. We just need to be pretty confident that this is correct, which I think it's okay. Let me just make a double check and make sure that we added that in correctly. Okay, so also throw in some headers here that tells it what kind of information it can expect. So we will add this here. And this is the different headers for the request. So it's basically saying the content type here is going to be application/JSON. And we'll save that. But basically, when we're actually deploying this application, we don't want it to be two separate apps because we can't deploy two separate apps to Heroku. It has to be one application. And there was a comment on a previous video or the previous video that I did that was like, why do you have two of these package JSONs? Why is it two separate? Because they're two separate apps until you deploy it. So essentially, how are we going to be able to deploy this as one app? Well, if we go back to our server.js file and we come down to here, we're going to say app.use, so some more middleware. And we're going to say express.static because we're serving static content. And we're going to say path.join, which is kind of using this here that we had imported. Path is basically, it just helps us deal with the paths because we don't know what the paths are actually going to be when this is running on some other computer out there. So we're going to say path.join, and we are going to join their name, which is the name of the current directory, to frontend/build. I know what you're thinking, but there isn't even a build folder. What is that talking about? Like, what is this? We'll get to it in a second. But then we'll come down here and we're also going to redirect all of our requests, right? So app.get, right? So if they're trying to get anything, we want to redirect /star, so /all requests. And we want to do that and redirect it to res.send file, which is essentially going to send the front end of our application to the client. And the client in this case being like the user that's interacting with the application. So we're going to say res.send file path.join __ dir name, and we'll do it with frontend/build/index.html. So people are probably confused, like, what is front-end build index.html? What is front-end build? Let me answer the questions. If you come into here and we go into our app, which is currently running on 3000, and we X out of that, basically when they're actually accessing this application, you're not going to be accessing all of these different files and everything in the format that we were altering them in. So it won't be looking like this. What you can do is do npm run build, and this is going to minify all of the JavaScript. It's going to break everything down so that the size of your application, when people are loading the page, is going to be as small as possible so it can load as fast as possible. So people really like to optimize for that. They really like the page to just load just like that, super fast. So that's one of the advantages of doing a production build. And when we come in this file on the server and we do path.join index.html, Well, if we go into index.html within the JavaScript here, we'll see this has an ID of root here. And this is getting deep into like how React like works under the hood, but just understand that basically in our index.js, it's gonna bind the whole React application to the root of this index.html document. So this is how the whole site is basically gonna get rendered, is we're gonna send back that file and it's gonna render it out for them. And let's see how our build is going. So the app is built. And if we come back here and we stop this and run it again. So this is kind of the moment of truth, right? Because if this doesn't work, it means that there was something even more wrong. And that's why it wasn't just the request not getting proxied correctly. So we'll hope that this works. But as you can see, now we're on localhost 8080 and it's rendering the site correctly, which means we're sending the site as a file for it to be rendered by our backend. And essentially when we do that, it helps us where now we only need to run one app instead of running two separate applications. And it makes it so we can deploy the application. So I guess I've typed this in so many times, a great book. And it's by Michelle Obama. And if we check our console output, we'll see that we got a response. And this response actually gave us back 200. So the problem was when you're working locally with these two different applications, sometimes it can be hard to make a request go from one to the other. But as you can see, we got a 200 back, which in theory should mean if we hop over to our cluster, we close that, and we go to the collections for it, we'll see Becoming, a great book by Michelle Obama. So yeah, we basically have the application working now. If you look here and you'll look here, the big difference is my books. We're coming up on time, so I'm gonna try to go straight to deployment just because I don't know if we're gonna have time to do a GET request here, but definitely like if there's interest, like it's already written up in the repository. So it compiles the React app into a type of executable file that is sent to the browser to be run in their browser. Not even really like a type of executable file, it literally sends it as, like if I go in here, right, and I go into this build folder that was just produced, you'll literally see that in static, there's CSS, there's JS, it's just chunks of JavaScript. And if I try to read this, like, what is that? You know, like it literally just minifies it to the smallest amount possible and then runs it in your browser. So it's not even really like an executable. It's just running the application, but this just really isn't human readable. It's just compressing it to the smallest size possible, because load times, like when you start getting into, you know, people using the application and actually paying money and things, load times are like the difference between 3 seconds of loading is like 50% of people will just leave the page or something. So when it comes to this kind of stuff, people really just go the extra mile to optimize sites, and it gets really nutty as you start to dig a little bit deeper in. Characters take space to send, and less data equals faster load. Yep, Rob, that is a good point. I think he mentioned that in his React workshop, which if I haven't said it enough times yet, you guys should really check out because it'll help make a lot of this make a bit more sense. But yeah, basically this means that we have this application almost in a place where we're ready to deploy it. All that we want to do now is this build folder here, we're going to need that when we deploy this. And since it's on git ignore, when we put this in git, it's going to ignore that. So we don't want to do that. So we're going to get rid of that. But if you look here, I'm about to push 1,000 files to git, which is obviously not the correct thing. And that's because it's tracking something called node modules out here. So we're going to want to create another file, call it dot. We won't be able to create it in this. Make another file, call it .gitignore. And this is just going to tell Git, you don't have to worry about this file. So we're just going to type in node modules, save that. And one more issue that we're going to run into is in the server file. If you look at the port, we don't know that the port's going to be 8080 when this is running on the server, right? So what you can do is, in order to get what the current server port is when this is running on some other computer somewhere else in the cloud, we can do process.m.port. And what this is going to do is essentially, if you're not familiar with this, this is an OR operator. So it's going to say if this doesn't exist, if there's no port, like that means that we're not running in production, and you can just grab 8080. So if everything's been set up correctly, then we should be able to come back to our app. Let me just make sure I'm not forgetting anything here. Should we move the DB address to a .m file? So Mike, I was gonna address this. If you'll notice, when we installed the packages, we installed .m right here. I don't know if we're gonna have time. I'm gonna try to just get this deployed and see if I can go over like a couple of other things. But like in the context of MongoDB Atlas, right? They gave you this thing to connect to your database, and technically you can't really go over with money on a MongoDB Atlas like shared instance, right? So that's not really a big problem. There are cloud service providers, right? Where if I were to just put my information out there publicly, like I put something in a GitHub repository and they can connect to my database, they can run me up like thousands of dollars. Like it's a very, 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 like I'm very happy that you mentioned this, Mike. I was planning on mentioning it. Just you need to be very careful with like secret keys like that and stuff, because you're going to be on the hook if you're just putting public information out there and people access it, and there's a possibility of them running up a bill and things. MongoDB Atlas will literally stop letting you put stuff into this database after you go over the size requirements. So you couldn't really spend money here. Like I've tried it before and it did not let me. So you should be okay for like the purpose of this. And also like right after I finish here, I'm going to delete this this cluster, so you won't even be able to connect to it if you wanted to. But definitely a good rule of thumb, be very careful when you're in a public place where people can see, you know, your code and everything, and you're putting stuff that lets them access your resources. So what we're going to do now is we're going to come back to our app here. We're going to say git status, and it's going to tell us all of our different files here. And there is one more thing we need to add. This is specifically, since we're deploying to Heroku, we're going to add something called a proc file. Basically, this is going to tell Heroku, this is how you start my app when we push it up there. So coming back into here, let me just make sure I get this right. So exactly what you want to put into that file is going to be web npm run start, which kind of makes sense. It's basically saying for the web version of my application, run npm run start, and that's going to start up the application on the server. So we're going to save this. The double question mark, is that essentially accomplishing the same thing, Rob, as like the double, or I guess we can go through with this, but I'd definitely like to know more about that because I'm not sure what you're talking about in the chat. Okay, so we have everything here that we're going to need. And just to check again, this git status basically tells you what's the status of all the changed files that you have. So if I type in git status, it's going to tell me all of this. And then I'm going to say git add dot, and then git commit dash m. I guess this is everything. And it's a lot of files that we just commit there. So then we're going to say git push. And that's going to push everything up to our main branch. So coming back into Heroku, and this is the wrong Heroku. Yep, here we go. So this is the MERN workshop one that we want to deal with. We're going to come in here and we're going to type in the name of our repository in Heroku in your project in the deploy tab. So like you'll get an overview of your project here, but you want to go to the deploy tab, go to GitHub. If you haven't connected your account, connect your account. And then you're going to want to find the name of your repository. Mine is MERN-app. And if I refresh this, you'll see all of the code here now. And then you're going to want to copy that, go into here, paste that, search it, and you'll find this one. And you'll just click connect. And if I go to activity, I think I have to manually deploy it. And now we'll see it going through the process of deploying this. And if everything goes well, it should deploy and work. So I guess we'll see. As you can, it's going through the process. The proc file declares a type web, which we did declare in our proc file. And it says that the build was successful. I don't always believe it because sometimes it tells me that, and then the app doesn't work. So let's open up the app. and it works. We have it deployed at mernworkshop.herokuapp.com. Can zoom in a little bit here, and let's see if it still adds the books. It's a good book. A Promised Land by another awesome book. That's by Barack Obama. And we should still be logging out the responses to our console. So we should still see if this is successful. And we got a response of a 200, and it said okay. So if we come back into our data and we refresh this, you'll see another book in here, A Promised Land by Barack Obama. Yeah, it worked. You don't understand how I did not know if that was gonna work. Sometimes like what you'll really notice too is like as you go through the process of deploying applications, like the most frustrating errors that you'll really run into is like something just isn't deploying right and you just don't know why, because it can be really hard to debug it sometimes. Oh dang, Rob, you got a 404. You hate to see it. But yeah, so I mean we have the application set up here. As you can see, it's running properly in Heroku. We could go through and we could add the get route, but I mean the get route is already on the GitHub, and I also don't want to keep people like to time or keep people too long. But we do have the app successfully deployed, so it's pretty cool. And I'll go through the remainder of the slides here. So we did connect the front end to the back end. We did deploy to Heroku. What's next though? So I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about this. Specifically the stack that we used here, what we essentially did, right, was we created two different apps. We built the front end application and made it into like a compressed form. And then we sent that through with the back end, right? So what's the problem? Well, if you go into like industry, number one, if like you have good experience with, you know, Express, React, Node, MongoDB, these are really sought after technologies. Like it's really good to build, you know, yourself with them. And if you're doing a hackathon project and stuff, I would say like this stack is fine. You don't need to be going through all these other ones and everything. But these are good technologies to call out when you start talking about like deploying applications and deploying MERN applications and that kind of stuff. So like Docker, for instance, all of this stuff that we were doing locally with, you know, adding all of our packages and whatnot, if I were to just, you know, take all this and give it to somebody else and say, hey, run this code. But let's say you have like a conflicting version of Node, or you have a different version of it, or, you know, something or another. This is a really big problem when you're working on projects like this. And like in industry, and you can use it in your personal projects. It's totally free to use. They have something called Docker. If you're familiar with what a virtual machine is, a virtual machine is and like me describing Docker in like, you know, 5 minutes is not going to give you the complete, you know, knowledge that you're going to need. But kind of coming back here, like, did Heroku automatically install the dependencies? Yep. When you, because of the fact that we declared web and we put npm run start and all that, it automatically built the outermost one. We just needed to build the front end application so that I could send it correctly. But yeah, it installed all our dependencies and everything, and it handled all that. It ran a lot faster than it did on my MacBook. But yeah, just kind of with Docker, like virtual machines, you could kind of think of them as like the machines that are running virtually on your computer. So Docker essentially is a really lightweight version of that. That's really powerful for it. Essentially creates a container around your app, and you can decide what kind of dependencies you want to install on that container. Which obviously at a high level, like this is just something I want to expose people to, because as I've started using this in projects, it's a learning curve, but it's really a game changer. Like it's very, very helpful, especially when you start getting into stuff that's harder and harder to configure. Docker is definitely something that's really, really valuable to look into. Nginx is also something that's really valuable. Essentially, you can think of it as a layer between your front end and your back end. So if you were running these as two separate apps, right, and they were accessing information from each other, you could use something like Nginx to facilitate that transfer of information. You could accelerate your website, use it for load balancing, security. It's really valuable. Something else that is really worth looking into. Just another call out there. And finally, where are my slides? Kubernetes is kind of Docker to the next level, which is like, if you wanted to build a really high scale application, right, you probably couldn't just deploy an app like we just did to Heroku. Like if you really wanted a ton of people to be able to access it and you wanted to be able to make changes to it without breaking it for everyone, Kubernetes is basically, imagine running a bunch of different versions, a bunch of different tiny container, a bunch of different Docker containers and managing them. And this just gets really, really bad when you start getting a bunch of different versions of your Docker running, of your containers running. And the reason I call these things out is because if you go work at a company, chances are these are going to be really, really valuable things to know. Like most large companies are using technologies like this to build really high scale like applications that are, they can't just go through the process that we did. They need kind of more flexibility, more control over what's happening. So just really good things to look into, you know, after you get comfortable with this and you want to kind of go to the next level and configure things a little bit more yourself, totally worth looking into. But thank you guys so much. If you want to reach out to me, you can do it here. It's my name at nighthacks.org. I don't move it out of the way. These are all of our social medias. Did Heroku automatically install the dependencies like a social media platform? I think if what you're saying is like, sweet, thanks, Rob. That's great. That's great to hear that people learn something. I think what Mike is saying is like a social media platform would use something like Docker and Kubernetes and things like that. Yeah, when you start to get to like larger scale systems, like it'll really just blow your mind, like how complex they can get with it. But at the same time, it can be this simple too. So I mean, don't feel intimidated on getting started. You can like what would we go for, like an hour, maybe an hour and 15 minutes or something, and we got an app deployed that we could start, you know, building on top of. Definitely don't let it intimidate you. You could totally get some stuff running locally and, you know, get running with some side projects and stuff like that. But just really good to see these kind of technologies and get exposure to them, because it'll help getting a job, and they're valuable to know, because it is like some of these things are like the industry standard. But without further ado, I think that should be everything from me. Thank you guys so much for, if I can find any way to stop sharing my screen. Thanks so much, guys, for, you know, taking the time out of all of your busy lives to come learn about the MERN Stack. I have an older version of this on YouTube too, if you want to check that out. And this one's going to be up on YouTube too. Maybe in a year there'll be a third version. I don't know. But yeah, this was fun. Thanks, everybody. Hope everybody learned something.
Awesome. Thanks, Dylan. Thanks for a great workshop. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Have a great night. Bye-bye.